As biologists, what we're trying to do is infer a tree of life, essentially. And for extant species, we can turn to molecular data. And molecular data is really good at doing this because we have both theoretical evidence, empirical evidence that can guide our models of evolution. So we can understand how these sequences change through time. Unfortunately, for the vast majority of living species, we don't actually have sequence data. And as paleontologists, we don't have any data for the vast majority of species that have ever lived, because they're now extinct. So if we want to get fossils in the tree of life, we have to turn to basically cladistic matrices. So these are ways of coding morphological data into a series of either binary or multi-state characters. And there's been a number of different methods that have been proposed to analyze these data. And what I'm going to talk about today are broadly these three methods. So parsimony, maximum likelihood, and Bayesian approaches. And kind of what we're doing here is look at all of these approaches in turn and seeing which is the most accurate. And we're assuming a priori that they're all wrong, essentially. So just to introduce these briefly in turn, the first one is parsimony. This is probably the most familiar to paleontologists, the most widely used in paleontology. And at its most simple level, this is just a way of getting fitting trees to maximize homology. So the idea is here, we're taking our cladistic matrix and trying to maximize the fit of the data to that and minimize homoplasy. And there are extensions to this that we can use, such as implied weights. And this is basically at its core a parsimony method, but within the search algorithm, we're downweighting characters that exhibit homoplasy. So we use this concavity constant K, lower values of which means more homoplastic characters have lower weights. So in practice, what we do is we take our cladistic matrix, we'd run it through some software such as PALP or TNT, and we would get out either a single most parsimonious or most parsimonious trees, which we can then summarize using consensus methods. And as with all phylogenetic methods, this has been criticized. Perhaps the most damning criticism for parsimony is that it exhibits statistical inconsistency. So no matter how much data we add, we're not guaranteed to converge on the right answer. So we could have billions of characters, and we may still not actually get the right answer. There have been other criticisms of things like implied weights for being internally consistent and basically tautological. So this means that it may maximize homology, but that might not be true homology in the data. So the second method that we're looking at is maximum likelihood, and this, as a statistical method, is this idea that we take our data and we try and maximize the fit of our hypothesis, which in this case is our tree and associated parameters, so things like edge lengths. And in order to fit this model, we need an idea of how sequences change through time. So the only one really available at the moment is this model, the MK model, which was introduced by Lewis in 2001. And this is a very simplistic model in which every character, every site can change between different character states with equal probability at instantaneous points throughout time. So we're assuming equal rates between sites and equal proportions of characters within matrices. So when we run a likelihood analysis, what we're trying to do is take this likelihood formula where we're differing topologies and branch lengths and basically trying to get the maximum likelihood fit. And we can extend this, so it's quite a simple model, but we can model things like variable rates among characters, so different characters can have different rates, and try and allow for different rates between different character states as well. So like parsimony, if we do this in practice, we take our matrix, we run it through some freely available software, and we get out either a maximum likelihood tree or trees, and we can summarize those. And probably the two biggest criticisms of this approach are in the model itself. So the MK model is extremely simplistic, and we've got no sort of theoretical grounding for how we should expect morphology to evolve. So this could be considered the real weakness of this approach. Additionally, when we're calculating the likelihood, we're assuming that every single state has evolved independently. And with morphological matrices, this is basically not going to be the case. So the final method we're looking at is Bayesian. And this is just a Bayesian formula. So here we're trying to maximize our hypothesis in terms of the tree, given our data. And that's just equal to the likelihood multiplied by the prior probabilities of our tree and model divided by the probability of the data, which is also known as the marginal likelihood. So within this, we need to specify some priors on our parameters. In terms of topology, we just say that every single topology is equally likely. And it's impossible to analytically estimate this formula, so we have to run MCMC approach, a Markov chain Monte Carlo. I won't really go into this, but basically what it means is that we get a posterior distribution of trees. So typically about 1,000 trees out of our software, which we can then summarize as a consensus. So again, we take our cladistic matrix, run it through some software, like Mr. Bayes or Rev Bayes, and we get out this posterior distribution of trees. Typically we take at least 1,000 trees from that. And unlike the other methods I've mentioned, this comes with kind of inbuilt support measures. So these posterior probabilities, values between 0 and 1, which indicate how well a split on the tree is supported. So this shares some weaknesses that maximum likelihood may also have in terms of it uses the MK model. It also has some which are specific to it, such as we need to set these priors, which may be completely arbitrary and or have effects on our posterior estimates that we don't want. So given these three approaches, we wanted to test the relative performance of each of them. And the way we did this was by using simulations. We didn't want to use empirical data because whilst this has the advantage of being real, we can never know what the true tree is we're trying to infer. And we didn't use philosophy because we don't know anything about it. So what I'm going to talk about today is some sort of case studies of work that we've done over the last year or two. And for all of this, this is basically the pipeline of how we've approached this. So we've taken trees or trees which are considered true. On these trees, we've simulated some data. Then using each of the methods that I've introduced, we've analysed these data, and then we've compared the inferred trees to the known true trees. And we've done this by looking at Robinson-Fold distance, which is just a measure of the number of splits that are found on one tree compared to another. So if this is 0, it either means the trees are identical or one of the trees is completely unresolved. So we've also looked at resolution of these inferred trees. So our kind of initial motivation for doing this was this paper by Wright and Hillis from 2014, where they took this approach. They took a known tree, simulated some data on it, and then compared the performance of Bayesian and parsimony methods. What they found was Bayesian outperforms parsimony. So our concern here was that they used an MK model to simulate these data, and then they analysed these data using an MK model and comparing it to parsimony, which obviously isn't the MK model. So there's potential that they're biasing their results towards the MK model. So what we did was take a very similar approach to them. We used exactly the same tree, but we simulated data that violated the assumptions of the MK model. So we did this in various ways, which I won't go into, but we ended up with hundreds, data sets of 100, 350, and 1,000 characters. So for each size, we simulated 1,000 matrices. And then we took these data sets, so these are just binary characters, zeros and ones, analysed them using equal weights and implied weights parsimony. For implied weights, we used a variety of k values, so different concavity constants, and the Bayesian MK model as well. And basically what we found is that Bayesian is more accurate than the other methods, and this is what Wright-Hillis found. So on this plot, Robinson-Fold distance is on the x-axis, so going towards 0 is better, because that means you're closer to the true tree. And even though all methods overlap in their performance, Bayesian is much tighter in terms of accuracy, so the two parsimony methods tend to have tails that go into regions of high inaccuracy. one thing we were concerned about was kind of the realism of our data. So we simulated these data, and then we considered, are they what we would expect from empirical matrices? And so the way we judged this was by looking at the consistency index. And this is probably familiar to most people. This is a parsimony measure of how well a character fits a tree. So it varies between 0 or 1. 1 means the character is completely homologous with the tree. Lower values towards 0 means you've got higher levels of homoplasy. So given a distribution of known matrix-wide CI values from the literature, the lowest reported is 0.26. So given our simulated data, we said we'll just get rid of everything below this value. So we'll only use data matrices that have high homology in an attempt to get more realism. And it should be noted as well that this region of high homoplasy, so low homology, is also where Wright and Hillis's matrices fell out. So if we just concentrate on those matrices, those ones with good amounts of homology, we find it doesn't actually affect our results very much at all. Bayesian is still outperforming the other two methods. So it seems that overall Bayesian is capturing higher accuracy, and this is due mainly to it not over-resolving the tree. So Bayesian trees tend to have fewer nodes than the two parsimony methods. So on this top row, it goes Bayesian, equal weights parsimony, implied weights parsimony. And on the x-axis, we've got increasing precision, so this is more nodes. And then going down the y-axis is increasing accuracy, lower relative false distance. So Bayesian tends to kind of live in this space where it has high accuracy but low precision, whereas the parsimony methods tend to, when they get higher precision, they're resolving nodes that are incorrect. So our kind of take-home message from this was that Bayesian achieves higher accuracy at the price of lower precision. So we wanted to look at a few more things using this same sort of approach. So that original tree that we used was very asymmetrical, so we wanted to look at the effects of tree symmetry. So we did this by taking two trees from the endpoints of symmetry, so one that's fully symmetric and one that's fully asymmetric. Then we simulated data on these, making sure that it violated the MK model, and we also, in a new step, introduced multi-state characters alongside binary characters. So we analysed these using the same methods as we did before, but we also introduced maximum likelihood into these analyses. And I think an important thing to note here is when we simulated these data, we made sure that it fit this empirical consistency index distribution perfectly. So this is showing consistency index for different empirical data sets binned into values of 0.05. And in our simulations, we actually threw out a lot of data that didn't fall into this. So we ended up with a distribution that matched this absolutely perfectly. And having done all this, we found pretty much the same results as we did before, in that Bayesian is getting high accuracy, but at the price of low resolution. As you increase the number of characters, all methods perform better, and all methods perform better on symmetrical trees compared to asymmetrical trees. One thing we noted here is that maximum likelihood is performing really badly, and this is because it's resolving a single tree which is fully resolved, so it's basically getting very high precision, but most of these nodes are actually wrong. So given these simulation results, we wanted to see if this kind of transferred to real-world data. So we took this matrix from Sutton et al. From a few years ago, and they were interested in this taxon, and basically in their analyses, it fell out as a crown group mollusk. So we wanted to see, given our different ways of analysing this, do these results hold? So this matrix had 48 characters, 33 taxa. So this is comparable with our smallest matrices we used. And if you use implied weights, we pretty much get identical results to the original authors. Equal weights parsimony gives similar results with a little bit less resolution. Maximum likelihood, again, is very congruent with the original study. Then if we turn to Bayesian, we basically get a rake. And this is what we would expect, because in our simulations, we've shown that there's no precision, basically. Bayesian isn't able to get any sort of precision at this size of data set, so we're just getting a few nodes. And we can't even say whether this taxon is a brachiopod or a mollusk in these analyses. If we look at a larger data set, so this one is from a couple of years ago, and this was just under 500 characters, over 100 taxa. And this is looking at this taxon Haramoevia and seeing where it fits in mammal phylogeny. And they found that it falls outside of crown mammalia. And even though implied weights gives a slightly funny result, it is still supporting this original study. And actually all methods are congruent with this original tree. So larger matrices, as we would expect given our simulation results, give more congruent results. Oops. So yeah, one thing I mentioned a minute ago was that maximum likelihood is doing really poorly in these analyses. It's basically over-resolving the tree and getting really inaccurate phylogenies. So one way to potentially deal with this is to look at the support of each branch within this. So we could do something like infer our tree and then bootstrap it and see relative support for these clades. And then take an arbitrary cutoff, such as 50%, and collapse nodes that have less than 50% support and keep those only the nodes which have high support. And this may be a way of incorporating more uncertainty into these trees. This is exactly the approach that Brown et al. Took in a response to our Proceedings B paper. And they basically said, if you do this, maximum likelihood and Bayesian performance, as judged by Robinson-Fold's distance, is near on identical. They didn't consider any parsimony method. And fundamentally, I think this is true, and I agree with it. The reason we didn't do bootstrapping is because in the literature, people don't collapse poorly supported nodes. So if they do bootstrapping, so this bar plot on the bottom here is a survey of matrices analysed this year, which used the MK model in a maximum likelihood and Bayesian framework. And every single study that used maximum likelihood and then did bootstrapping still reported a fully resolved tree, even though some of the nodes have poor support. So it's just not what people do in practice, even though perhaps it should be. So we were kind of, as this came out, we were looking at this in a bit more detail anyway, so we're taking our same simulation approach, and we were adding a step in these analyses. So we were taking our simulated data sets, analysing them using each of these methods, but then for equal weights parsimony and maximum likelihood, we were then bootstrapping the inferred trees and collapsing poorly supported nodes. So these are the analyses before we've done bootstrapping, and they give the same results as they did before, as we'd expect. But if you bootstrap, you get this really dramatic difference in that all methods are now overlapping in terms of accuracy. So Robinson-Fold's distance here is on the y-axis again. So going towards 0 is better. And what we're actually finding now is that Bayesian is able to resolve more nodes than other methods. So this is kind of flipped from our previous results. And again, if we look at this in terms of empirical matrices, we see the same story. So maximum likelihood and equal weights parsimony here, we're getting a lot of resolution. But then as we incorporate the support using either a 50% or 95% support value, basically all the resolution disappears, and parsimony can only resolve a single node at 95% confidence. So the final thing I could talk about is a sort of slightly different simulation approach we've taken. So earlier this year, Golubov et al. Had this paper, and he raised this point that by using molecular type models to simulate data, it's possibly biasing all these analyses towards either Bayesian or maximum likelihood models, because you simulated the data using a likelihood model and analysing it using a likelihood model. He said this was deliberately done. I don't agree with that. It wasn't deliberately done. And also, in our analyses, we're not just using all the data we simulate. We've used very stringent cutoffs and actually use a parsimony-based measure as a cutoff to ensure that our data is empirically realistic. But anyway, so in these analyses, we took a survey of a load of empirical data sets and measured per character consistency index within each matrix. And this gave us a distribution of from 0 to 1 where we expect consistency index of characters to fall out. So basically we took where we expect consistency indices to be within a matrix and then applied a very simple simulation procedure where we would either say a character is homologous, in which case we would just simulate a node, take a node, and then all taxa derived from that node share a character state, or it would be homoplastic with some degree of consistency index. So in using these simulations, we're not using any sort of likelihood-based model. We're not even taking into account branch lengths. It's all based on consistency index. And then we took the per matrix consistency index and totaled it. And then for every single bin in 0.1 increments from 0 to 1, we simulated data sets that fell into each of these bins. And we did 100 data sets per bin. And then again, we analysed this using equal weights, implied weights parsimony, maximum likelihood, and Bayesian MK model. And then we also took into account bootstrap support for every method bar Bayesian. So another thing Donoghue noted is in using actual timed edge lengths and a molecular model, we're kind of just reiterating the point that parsimony suffers from long branch attraction. But in these data sets, this is just showing the accuracy of each method inferring different nodes on the tree. So nodes which have long branches and those which have short branches. And basically all nodes, no matter the branch length descending from them, are equally easy or equally difficult to recreate. This isn't shown up very well, but along the x-axis here, we're going from 0 consistency index to 1. And then each of these bar plots is each method within each bin of consistency index. So when we have really high consistency indices, so basically all the characters in these matrices are really good, all methods perform incredibly well. They're getting the true tree with complete precision. In areas of higher homoplasy, where there's only a few characters which are homologous, we're finding that Bayesian is tending to outperform every other method. And this is probably what we would expect given the results of Wright-Hillis. So implied weights is kind of doing the second best in these analyses. And these trends continue whether we, how will we take into account support values. So these results were just from the sort of standard output trees before bootstrapping. When we do bootstrapping, the trends are similar across analyses. And this is just showing the same thing again. So again, increasing resolution towards the on the x-axis, increasing accuracy down the y-axis, and Bayesian is doing better than the other methods, basically. If we bootstrap, there are actually some occasions in which implied weight parsimony outperforms other methods, but when it does, it also underperforms in the same simulations. So this is suggesting that it's inferring sometimes good homology, and at other times it's maximizing bad homology. And this is just showing for each of those, in red, the number of accurate nodes that each method infers, and in blue, incorrect nodes. And basically at this bottom row, at 95% support level, only Bayesian is able to get a meaningful number of nodes resolved at high homoplasy values, whereas other methods tend to have absolutely no resolution. So this suggests that Bayesian methods at these areas of high homoplasy are doing quite well and have high confidence in correct nodes. So in conclusion, all methods are very accurate if we have large data sets and good amounts of homology. It's really important to collapse poorly supported nodes, whatever method you're using. And when we have particularly low amounts of homology, high homoplasy, Bayesian is the most accurate method still, even in simulations which should, in theory, favour parsimony. And in paleontology, low resolution may be all we can expect from small data matrices. So these are all my co-authors. Thank you very much.